For the majority of people who played it, the word RuneScape brings up fond memories of the time between 2005 and 2012. Memories of thrilling fights with dragons, memories of bantering with random people online in the Lumbridge cow pens, and memories of their hearts dropping upon seeing a player with a skull and crossbones over their head in the wilderness. The word RuneScape may also bring up memories that people aren't so fond of. The introduction of the Squeal of Fortune, the removal of free trade, and most importantly, the evolution of combat. These three changes to the game drove a lot of people away, and they never came back until the release of Old School Runescape, a version of the game from 2007, what most people considered to be the glory days of RuneScape. Interest in RuneScape today is at nearly an all-time high, but most of the attention is directed towards Old School, while not many people pay attention to the current version of the game commonly known as RuneScape 3. This feels like a great shame to me as someone who enjoys both versions of the game. This is where my newest two accounts come into play. These two handsome men are brand new Ironman accounts in RuneScape 3 and Old School. These two accounts will both progress through their respective games' content at the same rate as one another in order to show the differences between the games and why I love both of them. This is Interlocked. So the beginnings of these accounts are going to look both very familiar and very similar. They're both going to start off by getting level 5 thieving so they can have free access to food via the baker's stalls in Artie, and then they're going to roll that into completing Waterfall quest. Since they'll both be doing the standard start of pickpocketing men in Lumbridge, I just want to go over the rules and restrictions I've given myself for these two accounts. So obviously, as I stated before, they are Ironmen, so I won't be trading with anybody but NPCs. The Old School account is a hardcore because it doesn't have any drawbacks, but I don't plan to restart the series or anything if I lose the status. I don't really care about it. The RS3 account is not a hardcore because if a hardcore Ironman dies in RS3, the account becomes inaccessible, and I'm not particularly good at either of these games, so dying is more of a when, not an if, so I would like to not lose access to my account. In addition to the regular Ironman rules, the account's progress is going to be linked. And what that means is they're going to be progressing about as equally as I can get them to through their game's respective content. They'll be getting major upgrades at about the same pace as one another, but that doesn't mean that they're going to be getting the same items. For example, I might pick up Iban's staff on the Old School account, and at the same time I would be picking up a God staff from Mage Arena on RS3. Those two upgrades are about equally important to each other in their respective game because Iban's staff is going to unlock Iban's Blast, which is incredibly good in Old School, whereas accuracy means a lot more in RS3 when you're using magic, and God staff is going to offer that for that account. As the series goes on longer, these are going to get a lot farther away from what you can see as like a 1-to-1 equivalent just because RS3 has a much longer gear progression, but I'm going to do the best that I can. I just need you guys to work with me and recognize that just because I'm picking up a chaotic rapier on RS3 does not mean that I'm ready to start doing Theater of Blood on Old School, and just because I'm starting God War's Dungeon on RS3 doesn't mean I'm about to go kill Gardor on Old School. To give a general idea of the curve that I'm going for, I want my first kill of Triara in Old School to be around the same time that I get my first kill of Vindicta in RS3. So now that both accounts have 5 thieving, we're going to run into our first minor difference between the two. Old School added minigame teleports, which is going to allow us to very easily teleport to Castle Wars, and then we're going to take a walk completely risk-free up to Artie and begin stocking up on our cakes. The minigame home teleports aren't a thing in RS3, so we have to go through White Wolf Mountain. The wolves aren't going to one-shot me or anything, but I did cook some beef before I went through just to be safe, which was a great idea because I ended up going the wrong direction. I used up all 4 of them. In Catherby, I stopped and unlocked the lodestone, and then I took a short detour up to Seer's Village to unlock the lodestone there as well. The lodestone system is going to be a huge difference between these two accounts on the long run because the RS3 account is realistically almost never going to use law runes outside of setting up like house portals for non-lodestone teleports, and Old School is going to need a relatively consistent supply of them. After that, I just headed down to Artie, unlocked the lodestone, and then began thieving. Once I got about 75 cakes on both accounts, it was time to start Waterfall quest. The quest progresses exactly the same on both accounts up until Glariel's tomb. In Glariel's tomb, the RS3 account is free to basically just run straight past the Moss Giants. As long as we have food, they can't one-shot us. In Old School, however, Moss giants can hit up to a 14, so you have to be very careful around them. Otherwise, this happens. Oh. Wear it with pride, this guy says. I'm gonna wear this in shame. I'm ashamed. So yeah, I lost the hardcore status halfway through episode 1. I've already smacked 2 bonds on this asshole, and I already messed up the names of this account once by accidentally not making Interlocked 3 and Ironman an RS3. I just made him a regular account, so I figured I just wasn't gonna mess him up more. Plus, to be completely honest, I'd rather have the hardcore die really early and then just not feel bad about it at all and continue as a regular. Past the death of the hardcore, everything went smoothly in the rest of the quest, and both accounts very easily got to their 30 attack and 30 strength. At this point, I decided a good way to start off both accounts would be to get them both up to 40 attack so they can immediately start using rune weapons. The easiest way to do this is going to be to complete Fight Arena and Tree Gnome Village, but these 2 quests require actual combat, and the easiest way to deal with these combats is just to use magic from safe spots. Since magic requires runes and runes require money, I stopped by the Stronghold Security to pick up 10k on both accounts, which is surprisingly awkward to do on 2 accounts at a time. And then after that I went and bought runes from Aubrey's shop in Varric. For the old school account, the quests were pretty standard. I started with Fight Arena and then moved on to Tree Gnome Village, and by the end of the quest I had 17 magic from the boss fights and 40 attack from the quest rewards. The RS3 account was a different story. Problems for the RS3 account began pretty much immediately after starting Fight Arena. Everything is fine until you get into the jail. Once you're in the jail, the 2 guards in front of Little Sammy are aggressive, so I just had to try to spam past the text in between hits. After a few attempts of this, I just assumed that I had gotten through all the text, and luckily I did, so I was allowed to progress through the next part of the quest. I had no issues picking up the drink from the bar, but when I got back to the cell, I ran into another issue. So turns out, the interaction of unlocking the jail cell requires more game ticks than just talking to Sammy and going through that dialogue. There wasn't enough time for me to just spam through the text, so I was gonna have to deal with the guards. Unfortunately, with my gear and stats, by the time I was getting ready to kill the second guard, the first one would respawn. I dealt with this by having the second guard stand on the tile in front of the jail cell, and then walking under him, interacting with the door before he could realize that he had to step out to hit me. I just barely managed to complete this before he hit me, and at this point I just thought the quest was going to be a downhill slope. And then the quest bosses happened. Oh, evolution of combat is so weak early on. Please, God. Okay, Jesus. And you'd think that I'd have learned. Ah, shit. No! Don't fucking do it. Oh my God. Oh my God, not again, dude. Just end me. Okay. If a wolf comes over right now, I'm ending the series. Why? the attack. Eat a dick. Jeez. It's not even rune, I forgot. No.